Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. And today's our presenter Deepansh will give you some insight about how we can automate the vulnerability and can do the scanning of those security aspects. So you just this is more on the security testing side. So this will give us some insight about the security testing move instead of moving forward from the traditional testing approach. So welcome to today's session. So Deepansh, over to you.
Thank you, Gaurav. I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
visible now.
Okay, great. So thank you so much again for joining this knowledge today. My name is Dipansh Gupta and I'll be conducting this session today for the automated scanning and vulnerability assessment of web applications. So before we jump into the details, let us first look at the knowledge etiquettes. So please join the session 5 minutes before the starting time. And please make sure you provide a constructive feedback so that we can do better in our next sessions. And please keep your phones in silent mode. It's more for people who have joined from office, but yeah, I think they are all doing work from home. So still, if you want to take any call, you can go after the meeting. And please avoid any disturbance while we conclude this session. So today's agenda, let us go over that first. So first we'll be going over the security testing. We'll talk about what security testing is and why do we actually need security testing for today's applications, be it any front-end application or back-end application. And then we'll go to the actual agenda for today, which is automated scanning and vulnerability assessment. So what do we mean by that? And then we'll also cover some common security vulnerabilities that we see in today's web applications. We'll also go to some other types of automated scanning, not just web application scanning, but also other types of automated scanning that are applicable, be it operating system scanning or backend or system scanning. And then we'll also look at some of the tools that you can use to do these type of scanning. Lastly, we'll look at how we can integrate the OWASP ZAP with Selenium. So we'll understand what OWASP ZAP is, what kind of tool it is, and how we can integrate it with our Selenium tests so that we can do a security testing with our Selenium tests. And we'll also have a look at the demo on the same. So moving to the topic, so what security testing is. So the primary objective of security testing, as the name implies, is to test the security of our application. So we have to assess whether your application or your software is susceptible to any kind of attack. In today's world, as you might have already heard, that hackers try to penetrate any kind of application which has sensitive data or anything that can benefit them. And for most of the applications today, it is true that they have some kind of sensitive data which has data related to your customers, data related to any kind of client that you're working for. So these kind of data you have to secure at any cost. So security testing is necessary to ensure that these kind of breaches do not happen. We have to basically assess the vulnerabilities by conducting security test and understand what potential vulnerabilities are there in your application, if there are any, and then you have to address those prior to a deployment. So the idea is to address these prior to a deployment so that these do not occur in, or these do not happen in production, and whatever you can find in your lower environments like QA or UAT environment, so you can find that using security testing. You can predict future application breaches, as we talked about. You can catch these beforehand so that no security risks occur in production. And then also say sensitive information safeguard is a key point that we must keep in mind when we are doing security testing. Coming up to why do we need security testing? I think we already covered few points, but we'll go to them again. So first and most important is risk assessment. So every application today has some kind of risk or like potential vulnerability that you might be missing. It's great that if your application does not have it, but it's a better approach to always be better safe than sorry, right? So as we have heard, so we have to assess and see any weaknesses in your application before we deploy it to production. And protection of sensitive data, as we talked about, any kind of financial records like your social security number or your credit card information, your phone number, your addresses. So these are all information that you want to keep secure, and you want to make sure that these do not go into the hands of your attackers or hackers. Then customer trust, great point. For example, if you're working for a client and you tell them that you have already security tested your application, even if it does not contain a lot of customer data, they would have a better trust over your application because you have already done an activity which ensures that your application is secure. So to maintain that trust between your client and with your customers, it is imperative that you do security testing for your application. It also reduces attack surface. So for example, if your application has 3 or 4 key breakpoints where an attack can happen and like attackers can penetrate from, so to make sure that these kind of attack surfaces are reduced beforehand, we need security testing. Then early detection and prevention. I think it's a good idea to always like prevention is better than cure, as we have heard. So it's always a better idea to be better, like to do these kind of vulnerability assessments beforehand, so that these do not create ruckus in production environments. And then compliance with regulation. Now this is a like a different point and also not might be applicable for everyone, but in subdomains like banking domains and payment sectors, so you have to be compliant with regulations like these. So you have to do security testing because there the customer's data is of utmost importance, and if there is any kind of breach, that data, if it leaks in any way, uh, definitely there would be a lot of cases against you. So to be compliant with regulations in such industries, security testing is a must. Now that you talked about security testing, have some basic understanding of why we need it. So let us now look at what automated scanning and vulnerability assessment is and what do we mean by that. So basically it involves us using specialized tools and techniques so that we can identify and assess any kind of security weaknesses in your application, which can then be addressed to protect against potential attacks and threats. So when we say automated scanning and vulnerability assessment, we mean that we are using some kind of tools and techniques so that we can identify such risks that we have talked about, uh, and then address them properly so that these do not happen in production again. So to make sure that you are able to find these issues properly, we have to understand some what are the right tools for doing that, what kind of application you are working on, and how to do that. So the first point is selecting the right tools. So some of the popular tools that or options that you have for doing security testing for your web application are Burp Suite, OWASP app, and if you are talking about some operating systems or some other applications, you can look into Nessus, Acculytics, and Qualys. But our focus would be more on web applications today. So we will be talking about OWASP app in detail in our coming demo. And then second point is target identification. So you have to understand what kind of application you're working on. So it's not necessary that all these tools that we talked about, so they will work for all of these applications. You have to understand what your application is, assess that properly, identify basically what your target is, and then you have to use the tools accordingly. And like for API, the security testing tool would be different. For website, it would be different. For any kind of internal web application, it would be different. So depending upon your need, you can identify the best tool for you that is right for you. Then third is scanning and crawling. So once you have selected the right tool, then identified your application. Now, if we talk about web applications, so like the third point is now we need to do the scanning and crawling of your application. So what do we mean by that? So scanning an application means that all of your, like for example, if you have a website and you want to check all of the links that are available on that page, so scanning tools, what they will do is they will crawl through your page and they will get a list of all the URLs or endpoints that an attacker can hit, and then they will try to hit those in numerous different ways, so that they can see like if they're providing some wrong input, is it behaving abnormally or is it behaving normally. So those kind of things will be scanned, and all those links or URLs will be crawled over on your page. So once you have done all of those things like scanning and crawling, then fourth comes vulnerability detection. So your tool will now work on these URLs or links as we talked about, and try to find vulnerabilities such as SQL injection, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, authentication flaws, and as we talked about, like it will send various payloads like request, it will send various requests, and these requests won't be just always like correct requests. They will also be requests which are malformed in numerous ways, so that they can see that your application is behaving as expected. It is giving the correct like it is giving the correct error codes, it is giving the correct response back, and it is not letting the attacker enter into the application by providing all of these malicious inputs. Then there is authentication testing. So once you have done all this vulnerability detection for your basic application, now most of the applications today, they have some kind of authentication required or login. You might have OAuth 2.0 authentication with Microsoft or Google. Now those are pretty safe, but still, if your application has any authentication, you need to make sure that your scanning tool is able to check for any vulnerabilities in that authentication tool, or sorry, authentication mechanism. And the tool will try to log into your application by providing various inputs, again like malformed inputs and also correct inputs, to see that we are getting the correct response back. Then we have custom scripts and policies option as well. So if you're not satisfied with the default scripts that have been provided by your tool, you can also write your custom scripts and create your own policies. Like if you want to do some rigorous testing on your application and you're not satisfied with the output that you got from normally just doing the security testing, so you can increase the severity as high and then see what kind of reports you're getting then, right? So you also have that option with various tools now. Then once you have done all of these steps, then I think the most important step is reporting and analysis, because without reporting you won't be able to see what actually went wrong with your application. So once your scanning is completed, the tool generates a detailed report, and it does that for you. So you don't need to provide anything, you just need to provide title, details, all those things, basic things, and then it will give you a detailed report of what went wrong, what vulnerabilities are there in your application, and what is its severity. Is it a high severity? Is it a low severity? It will give you all of those details along with a description of that issue that you're seeing, and then it will also provide you how you can rectify that issue, and recommendations for remediation for the same. Yeah. Then once you have done all of these steps, then one manual step that you need to make sure is checking out for any false positive review. So you need to go through the report thoroughly and see if there are any kind of reporting that is actually not correct. So security testing tools or any kind of tool nowadays, so you cannot call them foolproof. It's always better to do some kind of validation manually, so that you are able to confirm that yes, this vulnerability is there in my application, and we should not skip it and we should fix it. So always try to take a step ahead and check that manually, so that you don't regret it in future. And then 8 point is prioritization and remediation. So you have to prioritize your vulnerabilities depending upon the severity. So I think reporting does that for you already. They provide you with a good severity analysis on what issues are high and what issues are low. So you can check that in the reporting and then prioritize accordingly. And then there is continuous monitoring. So once you have done this once for your application, then now the next step is to integrate with the CI/CD tools, so that whenever there is any new build that is pushed to for your application or your project, this security testing is running again, and it is always trying to find issues in your application. It's great that if your application does not have it, but if there is even one single instance when your application has it, you would be like you would be very grateful for your security testing tool. Yeah. So let us look at some of the common security vulnerabilities. Now this list, so OWASP Zap, or like OWASP is the company that provides us with the top 10 list of, or like top 10 vulnerabilities that are seen within the applications nowadays. So we are not going over all 16 or like all 10 of those vulnerabilities. We'll talk about the most important and the most common vulnerabilities. So first is SQL injection. So basically what it is for any application, if you're letting any user put inputs, so and you're using that input and creating a query by, if you have some stored procedure in your back like in your database, and that user input is going to that stored procedure. So if a user provides some kind of malicious input, idea is that your stored procedure or that query should not break, and it should not let your attacker access your application. It should provide like good response back, and it should not let the attacker access your application in any way. So taking user input such as search queries, login credentials, or form input, and when you're constructing SQL queries, so if you provide any kind of illegitimate code or illegitimate input data, so then that should not break your application. So this could lead to unauthorized access or data manipulation, and definitely it is one of the most common security vulnerabilities that people face throughout the world in their applications. Then there is broken access control. So policy refers to user access, where a user should not be able to access resources outside of their permission. So for example, if there are two different access control in your application, one is for admin and one is for a regular user. So like key thing is that the normal user should not be able to access resources that an admin can. So you have to make sure that these kind of access controls are working properly, and like an admin is able to access everything that he or she is allowed to, and a user should only be able to access he or she is allowed to. They should not be able to access something that an admin or someone from with higher access should be able to access. So bypassing these kind of access controls is also one of the major issues that people face in their applications. So make sure you try to check out these security vulnerabilities. And then last is vulnerable components. So any kind of components that are vulnerable in your application that contain security flaws or weaknesses that could be exploited by attackers. And these flaws can include buffer overflows, SQL injection, as we talked about, cross-site scripting, and these are very common that happens. And these kind of components you have to flush out early. And any outdated components that you have in your application should also be flushed out, that are not being updated regularly by developers, so they can have some kind of security breach in them, and you might not know it. So make sure that you are flushing out these kind of components. A very good example of this is 2 years ago, I think, when we had Log4j. So in Log4j and Log4j2, I think there was a big vulnerability that was detected, and over the night, all of the applications that were using these Log4j and Log4j2 in their Java applications, so they had to update the code and like dependencies, and it is a big hustle for everyone around all around the world. So best example of that is the Log4j2 from 2 years ago. Yeah. So types of automated scanning. Now we'll be focusing more on web application scanning only in our demo, but we'll still go over some of the other scanning that you can do. So first is network scanning. So if you want to check if there are any open ports or services, like in services on your network device, so you can do network scanning, and you can determine which hosts are active on a network. And then we have operating system scanning. Oh, sorry, operating system assessment. So in this also, like, you can identify vulnerabilities and misconfigurations in operating system. So for your operating system like Mac OS or Linux or any kind of operating system that you're working on, if you want to check any vulnerabilities, so you can do that assessment as well. And we'll talk about the tools that you can use for doing that in the next slide. Then container. Um, okay, thank you. Then we have container security assessment. So if you have any Docker container, you want to scan those containers also, so you can do that as well. We have tools for doing that. And then web application scanning, as we will be talking about in detail, it can identify vulnerabilities like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and crawling your web pages. So those kind of scanning that you can do with the tools. And then cloud security scanning, for if you're working on AWS or any cloud, like any cloud tool, so you can do scanning for those as well, and they have their own tools also to do these kind of scannings. So like very good options you have over there as well. And then code scanning and static analysis. So basically just doing your code, like a scanning of your code, whatever you have written, be it in any language like Java, Python, JavaScript. So you can analyze that code and see for any vulnerabilities in there as well. So let us look at some of the tools that you can use for this. So for network scanning, you can use tools like Nmap, which is an open source network scanning tool that can discover open ports. And then OpenVAS, it is also for network scanning that can identify security issues in your networks. For operating system, you can use Qualys. It is a cloud-based security and compliance platform. And then Rapid7, Nexpose. So it is also it can also be used for operating system assessment. For container security assessment, you can use Docker Bench. That is a script that checks for common best practices around deploying Docker. and then Clear, open source tool that scans containers for vulnerabilities and provides report. For web application scanning, you can use Nessus, a comprehensive vulnerability scanner, and Burpsuit. It is also very common. So Burpsuit and OWASP Zap, these are the biggest two tools for doing a web application scanning. And for cloud security assessment, we have this AWS Inspector, a service that AWS has to assess security and compliance of AWS resources, and Azure Security Center, similar to what is AWS Inspector does. And I can give an example for AWS Inspector as well. So, for example, if you commit your like AWS credentials in GitHub, so AWS Inspector is always scanning to see if any kind of credentials are being committed incorrectly in your GitHub repository or any kind of version control system, and they will send you an email and also your client an email that you have committed these credentials in this application, so please rectify it immediately. So that's how important, and that's how these tools work, that they're always scanning for these vulnerabilities and they inform you if they find anything. And for code scanning and static analysis, we can use OAuth Zap. It's a great tool that we'll be covering. We can also use it for, I think, port scanning as well, but our primary focus would be for web application today. And then check marks. So that is also a good tool that you can use for scanning source code for vulnerabilities. So let us now quickly go to the OWASP app and see how we can use that. So OWASP app is a widely used open source web application security testing tool, and it has been created by OWASP company, and security professionals use OWASP app to identify and fix vulnerabilities in web applications during development and testing stages. And in OWASP app, we have a proxy mode, so that like all of your requests, HTTP or HTTPS, so they are going through a proxy, and you have the option of doing different types of scanning like active scanning, passive scanning, and spidering. All of these go hand in hand. Like you can do active scanning separately also, but the best approach is to do first spidering. And spidering is nothing but automatically navigating through your web application and mapping a structure to identify any kind of hidden unlinked pages, as we talked about in crawling. So crawling is nothing but spidering. That's what we call it in OWASP Zap. And once you have spidered that entire page, so you have you have this entire list of all these hidden and hidden resources and endpoints that you can work on now and do active scanning. So active scanning will like run proper scanning on each and every URL and see if it is behaving abnormally in any way. Once you have done all of these, then Zap also provides a good reporting. It provides you with a good report which shows you vulnerabilities, and we will look at that in the upcoming demo. So some prerequisites for using OWASP Zap is you should have Java 11 or higher installed, and you should have OWASP Zap installed in your system. Selenium should also be installed in your system, so because we are doing the integration with Selenium for this demo, so you should have Selenium installed as well. And then Maven project is created, and below dependency is added in your pom.xml file. So we have these two dependencies that you need to add for Zap in your project. So once you have done all of these steps, so now the next step is to integrate this, and like the first thing is that we need to launch Zap so that we can see like it is running properly on localhost 8080 or whatever port number that you have provided, and you can hit that endpoint and see that your application is running. And once you get that, you can get out the API key. We'll have a look at that, how we can get the API key, because without you getting the API key, you won't be able to automate anything. Once you have that, then you can start creating your test. So here we have added a before method, and in that before method we have created an object for Chrome options, and then we are providing some proxy URL. Okay, so in that we have provided our local host and our address as well as the port number, and then we have created a proxy like proxy object with this proxy class, and then we are just setting HTTP proxy and SSL proxy for the proxy server instance for whatever, like whichever we are creating. And once that is done, then the basic steps that we do for Selenium, like creating a driver and maximizing the window, that's it. So those are the basic steps that we have added in before method. Then we have created this main method, and in this one, like by main method I say like the one that we'll be running for our for crawling our application, for running the passive scanning, and also then active scan. So we'll go to that code directly when we run our demo, and then we can also have this method of creating the report. We also go to that when we go to an IntelliJ, and then you can just call your @test method, so that all of these are running together and it is scanning your application. So let us quickly go to the demo. Let me, yeah, 1 minute, sorry. Yeah, so okay, so here we have our code. Before that, let me show you how Zap looks like. 1 minute. It's not, I think system is hanged. Okay, I'm unable to. Okay, here it is. Great. So this is the endpoint for our Zap, and okay, just give me 1 minute. Sorry. I think. Okay, yeah, so this is how our Zap application looks like, and like here whenever we are crawling any sites, all of those URLs will be present here. We'll quickly look at that once we run our demo. And to get the API key, you can go to tools and options, and in this API you would be able to find this API key over here. So once you have this API key, you can use it in your code. Okay. For some reason my laptop is and okay, yeah. So as we talked about before method, and coming to the main method that we have. So let me first run this so that it is running in background, and meanwhile we can go over the code. And I have also like set up this application in my local. It's an application by Zap only, and okay, let me show. Yeah, so this is the application. It's like it's been created by OWASP only, and using this it already has some vulnerabilities in this application, and that's why we have used this application so that we can actually see what this reporting looks like and what like how this app is working. Okay, so coming to the code. So first, what we're doing is we are doing the spider scan. So we have this object created for API. This is a client from client API class, and then we have used this object, and we are using the spider method, which has like the scan method, and this basically starts a spider scan. And once you get this API response, so you can check when this spider scan is completing. So once the spider scan is completed, so the status is returned as 100, and that means your spider scan is completed and all of your URLs have been successfully like crawled through for the entire page. Once that is done, then you can wait for passive scan to complete. Now you don't necessarily need to start the passive scan. It starts automatically whenever you are running Zap. So you don't need to explicitly call the passive scan methods, but you can if you want to make some changes into the default configurations. Once that is done, so your spider scan is completed, then your passive scan is completed. Then last step is to do the most important one, which is active scan. So using active scan, you can find the major vulnerabilities like SQL injection and cross-site scripting. So those kind of things you can find with active scan. So similar thing that we talked about in spider scan, but for that we have created a separate method, and instead of spider we are now calling a scan, and then or the same scan method, and same concept. We are then getting the API response, and then the API response we're checking if the status is equal to 100. So if it is not equal to 100, then we're calling it again so that we can wait till our till our scan is completed. Okay, so let us go to Zap now. I think this is already completed in the background, and I'm not. Yeah, okay, great. So as you can see now, this is completed. If you see over here, so all of these pages on our localhost 3000, all of the links were spidered, and all that list is over here. If you want, you can actually see those as well over here in this list. And once this spidering has been completed, then that active scan started, and then the active scan did called these URLs. If I go to this post request, so you can see like it provided all of these like dummy values or like malicious values to see if your application is like what kind of response it is providing back, right? So let us go to the report, see how that looks like. Okay, so let me open that. Yeah. Yeah, so we found one like risk in our application, and it is marked as high. And like basically what it says is cloud metadata potentially exposed. So it gives you a description of this issue, and it provides you with the URL also for that endpoint. And like you can actually check for solution, like do not trust any user in this config. This case is probably the use of host variable. So like these kind of things you can check with Zap when you run for your application, and get the best results out of that. So that's how Zap works and tries to find like vulnerabilities in your application using Selenium. You can take it a step forward by integrating it with your authentication mechanism. That's a bit deep, but you need to create some context, something called context in Zap, and then you can use those in your Selenium script, so that those kind of vulnerabilities with your login pages are also like flushed out with Zap. So that's it for today's session related to Zap and automated scanning and vulnerability assessment. So before we adjourn the call, please come up with any questions if you have any.
Nice session,
Yeah, I have a
Dipansh.
question.
Yeah, sure.
In your application OWASP Zap, in spider scanning, we can see there are some green and some red cat requests. So what does these green and red signs mean in processed?
Okay, so these are basically the endpoints that your Spider application is trying to find, and some of these are out of scope of spidering, which they basically do not care about. So all of those endpoints that your that spidering or your Zap does not care about, so they do find those endpoints, but they don't really work on them at all. They just provide you with the information that yeah, these I can like check these endpoints, but I don't really care about them, and they're out of scope for this like active scanning run. Mm, did that answer your question?
Okay, yes, that's for the red processed mark, no?
Yeah, yeah, correct. As you can see over here, it says out of scope. All for all of these, you can see it says out of scope.
Okay. One more thing, can I have this PPT? Uh,
Yeah, sure. Like I can share that. Yeah, sure.
okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, sounds good. I think that concludes the session for today then. Thank you so much for joining this session, everyone. I hope you like found it insightful. Have a nice day.